When I think about estate planning for snowbirds, I think about it in 3 tiers. So the first tier is essentially anyone that's going to start snowbirding. What do those people need to do? That's really, I'm renting a place in Florida, I'm staying at someone else's place, but I'm going to spend some time down there. What should I do? And then the second tier I think about is people that actually buy a place in Florida or another one of these snowbird-friendly states. What should those people do? The third one is our smallest group, and that's our high net worth snowbirds.
You found the Real Estate Law Podcast, because real estate is more than just pretty pictures, and law goes well beyond the paperwork and courtroom arguments. If you're a real estate professional or looking to build real estate expertise, then welcome to the conversation and discover more at realestatelawpodcast.com.
Welcome to the Real Estate Law Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Jason Muth. I'm one of your hosts. We're here with attorney broker Rory Gill from Next Home Titletown Real Estate and Urban Village Legal in Boston.
Happy New Year, Jason.
Happy New Year. Yes, this is the first episode that we're recording this year. So, we're proud to welcome a guest who has an awful lot to say about estate planning, and I think is a really great resource for people that have found their way to this podcast and don't even know where to start with, estate planning. This is Daniel Bernard, and he's with Toomey Latham, which is a law firm in New York, right?
Correct. Thanks for having me on the podcast today, guys.
Absolutely. So Daniel has a website called estateplanningforsnowbirds.com, and he has a great free ebook on there, which is quite long, actually. It's it's almost 200 pages long, Estate Planning for Snowbirds, that we downloaded in preparation of this episode. There it is, proud author. And we'd love to get into some great quick tips about, how to start your estate planning if you haven't done so yet. If you're young and listening to this, you're probably saying, why am I listening to an episode about estate planning? But maybe your parents are going through this, or maybe you're listening to this saying, hey, I probably should get my butt in gear and do some estate planning because you've started to gather some assets in your life. So welcome, Daniel. Thank you so much for being here. We'd love to find out more about your background. Tell us about yourself. Tell us about Toomey Latham, and tell us about how you found your way into estate planning.
So again, thanks for having me, guys. And so I'm an attorney with my focus is on estate planning, business session planning, everything in that realm. And then one niche that I focus on is estate planning for snowbirds. So we have a lot of people where I am in New York that start spending some time in Florida. Jerry Seinfeld had a joke that he said, my parents didn't want to move to Florida, but they turned 60 and that's the law. So that seems to be the way it works in New York. And I know Massachusetts is similar, and almost any state where it's freezing cold right now, people are looking to head south somewhere.
Do you throw that joke into all your intros when you're meeting?
I throw that joke into it's in the book. It's on every podcast I've done. I tell it to. I think I've told that joke more than Jerry Seinfeld has.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for him to call me very upset that I'm using his material.
Well, Jerry Seinfeld, if you're listening to this, maybe it's in the public domain, so maybe you're allowed to use it at this point. Who knows? Well,
Jerry, if you're listening to this, I'm sure you have a bunch of houses all over the country, and you could really benefit from what we're about to tell everybody.
Hey, you're also a salesperson, apparently. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Snowbird. I don't know if that's a word that's just common for us. I mean, I'm from New York originally, so I know what snowbirds are. Here in Massachusetts, we have them. Other places in the country might not. So talk a little bit about what is a snowbird?
So a snowbird is essentially someone who has their primary residence typically somewhere in the northern part of the U.S. or Canada. Canada has a lot of snowbirds too, and spends the colder winter months in somewhere warmer. So the typical snowbird that we think about is Florida. Florida was really the first state that first snowbirds. One of the first snowbirds actually was Rockefeller was one of the first snowbirds, just because he was the first person that had enough money to be able to travel between the states in the summer. So it's a newer concept of once we had the ability to travel between states for the winter months. people started to want to head south, generally in retirement, and not suffer through these New York or New England winters. And typically the question is, well, why do people come back, right? Why don't you just live in Florida, live in North Carolina? Typically, the things that bring people back are friends, family, and the grandkids. Essentially, is what almost every one of my clients tells me. I'm a snowbird because of my grandkids. Otherwise, I would just be in Florida.
Right. I have aunts and uncles that are snowbirds. They bought a place in Florida a number of years ago, and they still have a place in Westchester County, and they go back and forth, just like you're describing. Rory's parents are quite different. They're not snowbirds. They're just snow. Right.
Right. They're retiring north, actually, into New Hampshire. So they appreciate the cold. Maybe some of these concepts don't apply as much to them, but, part of it obviously is not just about the weather. People, move and establish domicile across different states because the rules are different. And some of them are more advantageous to you depending on what stage of life you're in, what your circumstances are. So is a basic concept. I know that your rules and taxes are very different state to state. And that can seem to be pretty bewildering when there are 50 choices. Snowbirds tend to domicile themselves in Florida or similar states. Is that right?
So I'll answer your question in a really long way, I think. So when I think about estate planning for snowbirds, I think about it in 3 tiers. So the first tier is essentially anyone that's going to start snowbirding. What do those people need to do? That's really, I'm renting a place in Florida, I'm staying at someone else's place, but I'm going to spend some time down there. What should I do? And then the second tier I think about is people that actually buy a place in Florida or another one of these snowbird-friendly states. What should those people do? The third one is our smallest group, and that's our high net worth snowbirds, because the high net worth snowbirds are the ones that really care about the domicile, because typically domicile is an estate tax consideration. And that's for our snowbirds that want to be residents of Florida rather than residents of Massachusetts or New York, where 2 states where we have a state level estate tax, because Florida does not have a state level estate tax. So that's why we see Naples, Florida, for example, has the highest concentration of billionaires in the entire country is in Naples, Florida. And I don't think it's because of the industry in Naples, Florida. You know what I mean?
Understood. So some of these choices are, it seems like with your client base of snowbirds, a lot of these considerations in decisions are either accidental or incidental to their lifestyle. And maybe for a certain subset of them, these decisions are very intentional where they go to. Is that right?
That is correct. I would say the large majority of snowbirds, it's a weather-related decision. And then for our higher net worth snowbirds, it can be a financial decision. I had a client recently where his CFO, he's still running his company, he's still active involvement, and his CFO basically realized, we have an S corp here, so everything's flowing through tax to you individually. If you didn't have a state level income tax, you could save a lot of money. So, and he had started to snowbird already, right? Mm-hmm. So this was a situation of maybe you should intentionally decide to be a Florida resident rather than a New York resident, and you could potentially save some taxes. So there was a lot of estate planning and business planning around that to how do we, make that transition the most efficient way possible.
As we're talking about kind of the concept that taxes and things are different among states, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, could I just ask the most basic question possible? Is estate planning, and who really should be thinking about it?
So in the beginning, in the intro, I think that was great, because estate planning is funny, right? Because we do the estate planning, but it really is to benefit our kids or our heirs, because a good estate plan is going to save your kids time, it's going to save them money, and it's going to save them a ton of headaches. So the timing savings is, if you die with, everyone has an estate plan. Your estate plan is either something that you've drafted on LegalZoom, and between us, it's probably really crappy, or it's something you had an attorney handle, and maybe it's good, maybe it's great, maybe it's just okay. or you have no estate plan, and your estate plan is essentially whatever the laws of intestacy are in your state, and your state will determine what happens to your assets. So the problem is, if you have nothing, your plan is for everyone to have to figure out who your heirs are, for your kids to have to step up, who's going to be the executor, who's going to manage this. And when we get into the snowbird planning, if you own property in Massachusetts and Florida, your heirs are doing that process in Massachusetts for the property up there, and they're doing it again in Florida for the property down in Florida. So when we talk about estate planning, it's how do we make things very efficient for my kids based on how I've set up my life, so that when I pass away, things can move smoothly, efficiently to that next generation, whoever I want that to be.
I love that. And when should somebody start thinking about estate planning? Should somebody be doing it when they're younger in their working years, when they retire? Should they wait until the very last minute to draft the estate plan? When should somebody start thinking about this?
I think that's a great question. And I think, we can, there's estate planning, you can start thinking about estate planning when you turn 18 years old, essentially, because once you're 18, you're emancipated, and your parents, no longer, run your life. So to back up a step, estate planning, to continue on the estate plan discussion, estate planning isn't just what happens when you pass away. There also could be a period of time where you're incapacitated and you need someone to make a medical or a financial decision for you. So that would be via a healthcare proxy, determining someone to make a medical decision for you, or a power of attorney, someone to make a financial decision for you. So technically, estate planning could start when you become 18, when you turn 18 and you're going away to college or whatever you're doing, and you need someone to make a medical decision or a financial decision. Maybe that's your parents. Maybe you want those documents for your parents. Then I like to think about it as events in my life. When I start accumulating assets, where do I want those assets to go when I pass away? And then I think the big level when people really start to think about it is when they have kids, because now you feel like you're responsible for someone else. What happens if me and my spouse both die? Who's going to take care of the kids? So whenever you get into the estate planning process, at that point, it's, the estate plan that I do for someone at 18, that's a power of attorney to their parents. That's a healthcare proxy to their parents. If someone comes in at 30, they just had a baby, that's a guardian for their kids, and maybe setting up a trust for their kid, but that kid is a baby. At that point, that's not going to be your final estate plan, right? So at that point, it's like getting your oil changed. We'd say every 3,000 miles, not everyone does it. But so we typically tell people every 5 years, let's look at this. But another way to look at it is life events. So you have a baby, maybe that's the time to come in and make sure this plan still makes sense. You get married, divorced, remarried, maybe that's a time to come in and make sure this still makes sense. Retirement, that's a time to come in and make sure, does this still make sense? And then grandkids is another time, does this still make sense?
So without going too much into specific numbers and everything, I have two questions as the non-attorney on this. I'm the layperson, I guess. Number one, the types of people that come in, you just described people at all different stages of their lives. But if you can kind of pick the 75 or 80% of the majority of the people, who are they? Who is your, not ideal customer, but who is the type of customer that you typically hear from most frequently? Not the outlier, not the 80-year-old that's on the, hasn't gotten to this yet, or the ambitious, precocious 14-year-old. So I ask one question at a time. So that's my first question.
So I would say you hit the nail on the head with the outliers. The outliers are the people that are 90 years old and they've done nothing to this point. And the people that are, and I've had a couple of those last year, and then the people who are 25 years old and they want to do it. I've had a couple of those, but the majority of people are probably 45 to 60. Typically, kids are teenagers at this point, and you see a lot of people in retirement. They start to, typically they come in with a plan from the mid to early 80s. And it talks about kids that are now in their 30s and 40s. And, those are the people that are really updating right now.
Right. Yeah. So if you're listening to this podcast and that fits you, if you are that person and you haven't done this yet, it's probably a good idea for you to contact an estate planning attorney. Perhaps Daniel's a good one if you're in the states in which he practices. And if not, go find somebody in your state. The second question I have, and again, don't go into dollars and cents too much in this, but like as somebody that doesn't fully always understand how attorneys are paid, how do you work out a fee schedule for your clients? Like if someone were to contact you for the first time saying, I need an estate plan, here's who I am. I'm a 43-year-old, I have a couple kids, here's my assets. Is it hourly? Is it a flat rate? How do attorneys normally address that?
I think most attorneys I'll just call, without knowing you guys too much, I'll just call us, the regular, people. We can probably sort out our assets pretty quickly. A good attorney's going to be able to give you a flat fee for that, or at least give you, I don't necessarily give them an exact flat fee, but I can give you a range of where it could end up. And that's to be fair to you, right? Because you could be the client that calls me 100 times, or you could be the client that calls me one time. The first draft is perfect. So we can probably give you a very good, accurate range of where things should end up. And then for the higher net worth individuals, it's typically on an hourly basis because there's just a lot more moving parts with that. Again, we can give a range. I think every firm can probably give you a range of where it's going to come in, but there's just a lot more moving parts with that.
Yeah, I think that's fair also. People probably have questions saying, boy, is this based on a percentage of my assets? Is it based on an hourly rate? Is it based on a flat fee per document? But regardless, it's, I guess I would say it's probably not, super cheap legal Zoom, but it's not going to break the bank and it's worth doing. Like if you're going to have an estate plan. So again, if people are on the fence because of cost, it's probably worth a discussion with an estate planning attorney, and you'd probably willing to take a conversation with somebody, right?
It seems odd, but it's definitely cheaper to do estate planning than it is to do estate administration. So some people just say, listen, I'm dead, I don't care. And that's where I think when you brought up earlier in the intro, talk to your parents, because at the end of the day, it's the kids that are going to benefit from this. So sometimes I do have it where the kids are driving the bus, kind of saying, Mom and I really need to do this. Can you just meet with them and talk to them? And then when I talk to them, explain to them, you're going to save your kids money. If you really like these kids, you're going to, aside from the money, you're going to save them a ton of headaches. Because if we can do a good estate plan, we can make things very easy for them, at least legal wise. I always say I can make the legal stuff easy, the emotional stuff, that's on you when someone passes away, but I can at least make the legal stuff easy when someone passes away.
I mean, I would actually give you a little bit more credit than that. Having a good estate plan can actually avoid some, maybe not all, family arguments later on if the intentions are laid out pretty clearly. So,
oh no, I agree with that 100%. You can definitely you can cut out as much conflict as possible. I meant the emotional of you're sad, mom and dad passed away. I said I can't help them with they're sad that you passed away, but I can help them with they're not going to be angry with you, at least of you passed away and you left them with a big headache of having to administer your mess of an estate.
I would go into a couple more specific questions just to kind of illustrate to people listening what are some of the choices that you'd be making and sitting down to do your estate plan, but also for my own curiosity, because I do see some tensions in estate planning. For example, how should somebody title their assets, their real estate assets, their non-real estate assets? Should they try to keep it in their name? For example, if you hold something in your name, then you may get a stepped-up basis for the asset, for the real estate asset when you die, which would avoid capital gains tax for your heirs. Or should you try to get things out of your name so that they're into a trust and there are less probate and estate tax implications? Perhaps it's a little complicated if you're just listening and you're not familiar, but that's a real choice to make for a lot of people is, should you keep the asset in your name or should you put it into a trust or something like that? Could you comment on that, and how do people work through who should own their assets?
That is an excellent question, and that is the exact crux of the estate planning for Snowbirds. is, so we can have, when I'm estate planning for Snowbirds, I kind of want to get the best of both worlds, right? So a trust is a great way of avoiding probate, because if your asset is in a trust, then that asset passes via the terms of the trust. It does not pass through the probate process. And to take a step back, some of the listeners might be saying, what is probate, right? So probate is the process where your nominated executor has to go to the surrogate's court or the probate court in your county and present your will for probate, and that the surrogate will appoint them as executor, and then their job as executor is to marshal your probate assets. For the large majority of us, our only probate asset is going to be our house or our real estate, because anything that has a beneficiary designation is not a probate asset and is not going to pass via the terms of your will. So IRAs, 401ks will always pass to life insurance, always passes to who you designated it goes to. It doesn't matter what your will says. It goes to those beneficiaries. So for a lot of us, the non-probate assets are our house. And your house does not have a beneficiary on it because it's usually your two spouses, or it's just you, or the surviving spouse owns the house, no beneficiary. So when you take that house, rather than having it in your individual name, you have it in the name of a trust. The trust controls the disposition of that property. So rather than having to go to the surrogate's court or the probate court, the trustee can essentially sell that property the next day. As soon as they assume the role as trustee after your passing, they can sell the property, they can transfer it to themselves, they can manage your estate much quicker, much more efficiently. And so then the key is we want the best of both worlds, right? We want to avoid probate, avoid all those expenses, but you hit on a very great point about the basis step up, because a lot of us, or a lot of our parents, bought their houses in the 70s, 80s, even 90s when the base, and they paid a lot less for these houses than they're worth right now. And at death, if they die owning that house, they get that basis step up to fair market value on date of death. And that can save us as the heirs a lot of money in capital gains tax. So the key distinction is, if you have a trust that's a revocable trust, some states call them living trusts, your heirs still get that basis step up at death, because that property is still considered your property for the estate tax purposes. So even though the asset is in a trust, your heirs still get the basis step up at death. My disclaimer on that is not all trusts provide that. Some irrevocable trusts that we design for estate tax purposes remove the value of that property from your taxable estate, so your heirs won't have to pay an estate tax for the value of the property, but they would inherit your basis in the property and would not get that basis step up.
And I mean, I hope the complexities to people listening kind of illustrate how important it is to have the conversation with the professional about your estate plan, because we do have a lot of these decision points and a lot of these nuances that can really save your heirs money and also a lot of effort and strife processing your estate.
First of all, the comment that I have is just listening to this discussion. And, even though this is the Real Estate Law podcast, we haven't had too many lawyers on besides Rory. So, now I feel double teamed with two people that are talking legal. Boy, I'm going to walk away from this and I need to go update my estate plan. A lot has happened in my life. We're pretty open with things, but, marriage, child, and other real estate that we have, like, rental properties and whatnot. And I'm, woefully underprepared with what I have prepared to account for all those things. So that's a takeaway that I have from this. Did you have a takeaway, Rory, that you've gathered your thoughts and now you want to?
I have. There was just an additional point I wanted to make. The complexities, I think, don't just apply to necessarily high net worth individuals who have a lot of monetary value to protect as part of the estate, but also to lower net worth individuals who are planning for nursing home care and, we call it here in Massachusetts Mass Health, but different Medicaid programs for the elderly in nursing homes. And there's a lot of planning that is involved there to make sure that the family home isn't seized to pay for the health care after your death. So if you think a lot of these complexities apply just to high net worth individuals, that's really not the case. And sometimes people who are qualifying for state aid in different capacities have more of an incentive to do this and to do it early so that they don't, because those sorts of decisions made at the very last minute won't protect you.
100%. That's a great point. So it's essentially anyone that owns property. If you own your house, you definitely need to consider some sort of estate planning around that house. So there's a very small percentage of people that actually are subject to the federal estate tax, because our exemption right now for federal is $12,060,000 per person. So that's $24,120,000 for married couples. Most of us aren't going to get there. You guys will get there if you're not there already, but maybe I'll get there. We don't know, but
we're not there already, for the record.
So for most of us, it's not really a big issue, even though they sometimes make a big issue out of it. For a lot of us, it's not a big issue. And the bigger issue is actually the long-term care. Unfortunately, I'm not going to get political. It doesn't matter to me one way or the other, but this is just the way that we care for the elderly in this country, is typically through artificially impoverishing yourself, or actually impoverishing yourself by paying for the care and qualifying for some sort of state aid, whether that be Medicaid or some other state aid. And typically these state aid programs will have exempt assets. So your house is an exempt asset. So people think, well, it's fine. I qualify even though I still own this house. The problem with that is when you pass away, the state can and will put a lien against your house so that they can recover what they paid for your care. So Florida has a homestead exemption. So in Florida, people get to keep their house, but not every state has that. So New York definitely doesn't have it. And the way we plan for that is you put your house into an irrevocable, we call it here an irrevocable Medicaid type trust. And then we have a look back period. Every state has a look back period. The minimum is 5 years. And you essentially have to do this planning 5 years before you're going to go into a nursing home to protect that house. And the key with these properly drafted Medicaid trusts is that even though they're irrevocable, it still counts as an asset in your estate when you pass away. So you still get the basis step up, even though the house is in a trust, even though the trust is irrevocable, you still get the basis step up. And one other thing I want to say just about all of the trusts is I don't want people to feel like, well, I worked my whole life, I got this great house, now I'm kind of just giving it to my kids before I pass away, and what if they kick me out? Or what if they want to sell the house and they tell me, you can't handle a house this big anymore, we're selling it and we're buying you a condo? That's not going to happen. And I tell my clients all the time, I will gleefully sue your kids if they try to do that. We're going to get them removed. We'll disinherit them. I don't want people to feel like they're losing control over their assets by doing this stuff. In a revocable trust or living trust, they're going to be the trustee. So they're going to make all the decisions. In an irrevocable trust, for the Medicaid type trust, we're going to give them a power of appointment over the trust assets. And we're going to give them a removal power over the trustee. So if Junior says, we're kicking you out, we're selling this house, we're going to remove Junior and we're going to put someone in that's going to do what you want them to do.
There's a lot of pride and trust involved. And, my focus group is just my family and my parents, and who happen to live in the same house I grew up in. And we were just there recently. It's the only house I know. But, they're still in it. And I think that there's a lot of pride in the fact that they've kept this house for so long. They paid the house off. They were the only owners of this house. They purchased it new back in the early 70s. And here they are. And, they have healthcare needs now, but, it's just easier in their mind to live there. And they trust me. I mean, I'm an only. So I am the one that's going to take care of all these things afterward, and I'm not going to buy the house and kick them out if they don't want to. We've gently encouraged them to give some thought to, alternative, easier living situations, but it's going to be their decision for a variety of reasons. Well, for obvious reasons, but, they're staying where they're staying, because of the support network and familiarity and that kind of thing. And I'm sure that happens a lot, especially in the New York area. I mean, I couldn't imagine this is such a perfect storm. I mean, it's not by accident that you're doing the work that you're doing. The New York population is huge. There's a lot of people that are aging. A lot of them are moving to retirement age, and a lot of them are physically moving to places like Florida. So, it seems like a really built-in audience of customers that you have for many, 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 many years to come.
Let's hope.
Yeah. Why don't we move toward our final wrap up, and then you can talk about, all right.
I do have one thing that I'd be remiss to walk away from this podcast without bringing up. You've done, an excellent job branding yourself as Snowbird Lawyer and building a lot of genuine expertise marketing, particularly for New York, Florida snowbirds. What advice do you have for, other attorneys, real estate agents, or other professionals that are looking to find their niche and develop an expertise that's really focused on a particular client base? And then how do you market to that client base?
So the first thing I'd say is don't pick snowbirds. I think that corner is taken. I think it's, I put a lot of effort into when I was first starting my career as to, what practice area was I going to go into? And then when I got into that practice area, I got some good advice, which was, get into a niche area. And I didn't really listen right away, but sometimes you got to hear something 2-3 times. And I did a lot of reading about business generation, business development. And although it seems counterintuitive, right? I don't have any business right now. I want to focus on everybody. I want to be the one-stop shop. Why would I laser focus on this one group and exclude everybody else? It just seems counterintuitive. But I went for that thing. And the truth of the matter is when you get into a niche, you become the go-to for that niche of people, because you can say things like, I literally wrote the book on estate planning for snowbirds, right? Mm-hmm. And other people are not going to exclude themselves. No one's going to say, Dan only deals with snowbirds. What does he know about regular estate planning? Because the bottom line is, there's the base level people are always going to come to you because they know you have that base level of knowledge. It's just that niche people are definitely going to know you're the go-to guy, for lack of a better term, or go-to expert.
All right. Thanks, Jason. Sorry, I definitely wanted to point that out and bring up that topic.
And if I could just say the one thing about the specifically estate planning for snowbirds, we talked about the trust, but the trusts are extremely important for the snowbirds, because if you own your house in your individual name in Florida and New York, Massachusetts, wherever it is, your heirs have to do a probate in New York and a probate in Florida. If you get at least one of those houses, preferably both of them, into a trust, we can avoid probate, at least in Florida, or hopefully entirely. And that's just going to save your heirs a lot of time, money, and headaches.
Excellent advice from attorney Daniel Bernard. We're going to move into our quick final 3 questions, which we ask of all of our guests who appear on the podcast, just as a way to tie up the conversation and lighten it up a little bit. So the first question is, if you were to be able to get on stage and talk for 30 minutes about any topic with no preparation, it can't be estate planning for snowbirds, what would it be?
It's got to be something NFL football. It drove my parents crazy, but like every report I had to do, middle school, high school, I somehow wrote something about NFL football. My parents would be like, they said to write an essay about Emily Dickinson, and you somehow turned it into about this essay about the New York Times. This makes no sense. Like, you're a maniac. And then when I was in college, I was an economics major. We had to do a final project, final paper, whatever. And I wrote my paper about, do NFL players play harder in the final year of a contract? So my parents said, you're 22 years old. Like, well, you're still doing this? And then when I was in law school, I was in a gaming law course, and we had to write a paper about some kind of gambling thing. So I wrote about, does what the NFL's stance on gambling a calculated contradiction, because they actually benefit a lot from people being very interested in gambling on the games. It drives up the popularity, and even though their public stance was we're against it. So I wrote that paper, and then my parents said, "You're in law school. You're still writing about football. Go move on with your life." So I think I could talk about football all day long, and that's my thing.
We could reserve that for another conversation, because I could probably talk about a lot of football. Rory could attest the fact that I watch almost every televised game, and I do make my little bets, and I do poorly at that.
And you can go to New York now and do that too. You don't just have to drive to New Hampshire to do it.
So lucky for me, the paper I wrote, I submitted it to the UNLV Gaming Law Journal, and they published it. So I have this nice thing hanging on my wall in my office. But now that we have FanDuel in New York, I feel like I got to take it down.
Yeah.
Well, no, we don't have FanDuel. We have everything. We got DraftKings. We have just sports gambling now.
For the record, my answer for this question is professional wrestling. Everyone knows it will be professional wrestling. And I also wrote a paper about professional wrestling at college, and it got me an A in the course. So, I think there's a precedent for this.
Got to pick what you like.
My follow-up, Giants or Jets?
Giants.
I mean, either way, I feel bad.
Either way, you guys don't like me. I know. Giants.
Well, I grew up a Giants fan, so
okay.
It's been painful to watch the past few years, but
But the Giants have been painful for the last 10. The Jets have been painful for our lifetimes.
Oh, yeah, since Joe Namath. All right, question number 2. Tell us something that happened early on in your life that impacts the way that you work today.
It's kind of strange, but I graduated from college in 2008. So if you remember back in 2008, I couldn't get a job as dog catcher, essentially, in 2008. So that's what put me on the path of going to law school. And I think it was just the best thing that could have happened to me was the entire world collapsing, because it really focused me when I was in law school on I need to intern every semester. When I was in college, I just thought, typical millennials, right? We're like, I'm just going to get this degree. Someone's going to give me a great job. That's what my parents have been telling me since kindergarten. It's going to be fine. When the world really slapped me in the face, I figured out, no, I gotta make something happen. So I think that really put me on the path of I had an internship every single semester. I was at the surrogates court, tax court, working in firms. I did the clinic. I did everything that I could do. That's why I wrote papers, tried to get them published. I just always was trying to do things, and I've carried that into my career I try to blog, I try to write things. I wrote a book. I try to come onto podcasts. I try to give seminars, or local seminars. So I think that's really just pushed me to just be more aggressive and get more into things.
Yeah. 08, 09, tough time. I mean, I was in between jobs a couple times, and Rory had the misfortune of being in law school and graduated into a recession. So, yeah, I can sympathize. But I mean, what you've done is a perfect example of kind of rising out of that economy with, some grit and focusing on a specific niche and really going all in on it. And, here it is, over 10 years later, and look at the success. You've written the book on it.
Absolutely.
And finally, what are you watching or reading or listening to these days?
Towards the end of the year, what I typically like to do is I get into the Tony Robbins stuff again, kind of to start the year off right. So pretty much right after Thanksgiving, I listen to the Personal Power 30-day program, kind of try to get my mindset on that. And then I do some Jim Rohn stuff. So I don't know. Some people think it's hokey. I like the personal development stuff. So it's been a lot of Jim Rohn and Tony Robbins, and I do like podcasts a lot.
Yeah, I mean, they wouldn't be successful if they didn't have people listening, and I think it's always a good idea to reset, especially toward the end of the year. Coming into a new year like we are right now.
And then I know you guys can sympathize with this. I have 2 kids, so it's a lot of Disney Plus.
Oh yeah,
I've seen every episode of Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. There's actually a local reporter here who's on Instagram, and she was singing the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse intro song. And I actually messaged her and said, you're singing the words wrong. It's actually this. And
it's come inside, it's fun inside, right?
Yeah. Come inside, it's fun inside, and something about beans. And I said, no, you got the lyrics wrong. This is what it is. And you know what's great about Disney Plus? Not to do a sales pitch for Disney Plus, but it's all the stuff that I had when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I get to introduce to my daughter, and my son's 8 months old, so he doesn't really understand what's on the TV. But
Yeah. We love the musicals. We love, she watches, it was a lot of Moana, Frozen, Encanto that just came out, Coco. We watch Coco all the time, but you hit the nail on the head. There is some drug in the Mickey Mouse clubhouse that she just cannot get off right now. So we're eager to see how this evolves away into the next obsession.
Yep.
Daniel, tell us really quickly where we could find you and how we can get this amazing book.
So if you go to my firm has a website, suffolklaw.com. That's Toomey Latham's website. And then I've set up a website pretty much for the Snowbirds called estate planning for snowbirds.com. That's where they can get the download a free copy of the book. And I'm always happy if any of your listeners have any questions, send me an email, dbernard@suffolklaw.com. And I'm always happy to answer anyone's questions and talk about why the Giants are terrible or estate planning for snowbirds.
We will put all that in the show notes, and I hope the Giants turn it around. I mean, man. But we'll have to circle back after this year and see how your business is doing and how the Giants are doing with the new head coach.
Let's hope they both go through. Yeah, let's hope. Let's hope they both do well.
So thank you so much for spending some time here. Thank you, Daniel. And we wish you the best for a successful year this year. And we encourage you, if you're listening, to go check out his website and book. Put that in the show notes. But it is Estate Planning for Snowbirds. So on behalf of Rory and myself, thank you so much for listening to the Real Estate Law Podcast. If you have enjoyed this, if you could like this and subscribe to the podcast and give us some comments, we really appreciate that as well. And that's it. So thank you so much for joining us in this episode, and we will talk to you next time. Bye.
This has been the Real Estate Law Podcast. Because real estate is more than just pretty pictures, and law goes well beyond the paperwork and courtroom arguments. We're powered by Next Home Titletown, Greater Boston's progressive real estate brokerage. More at nexthometitletown.com. And Urban Village Legal, Massachusetts Real Estate Counsel, serving savvy property owners, lenders, and investors. More at urbanvillagelegal.com. Today's conversation was not legal advice, but we hope you found it entertaining and informative. Discover more at realestatelawpodcast.com. Thank you for listening.